and today we're going through a 2015 thriller drama movie called Careful What You Wish For. The movie begins with a boy named Douglas, with his dream description of a good summertime includes beaches, parties, ladies, fun, and last but not least, the promise of a love adventure. As he and his parents move into their lake house for the holiday, his mom asks him if he has any books packed at all to tease him. He is playfully corrected to be responsible now by his parents. He meets up with his friend, Carson, who helps him fuel his fantasies with endless possibilities and promises of a great time with the ladies. Carson teases him with his tragic adventures with women and how he shouldn't chicken out on any of his exploits. They walk into an open bar where the county sheriff, Big Jack, is ruling the show by introducing a live band rather than karaoke. There's giggling and more fun as everyone is having a good time together. For Douglas, summer is just starting. Back at their lake house, Douglas comes in but finds nobody home. He takes a quick look around the house. He looks out the window just in time to see a rich couple arrive. The beautiful lady he sees catches his eye. The couple is seen checking out available houses for the taking, as Douglas tracks them from his window. The beautiful lady catches him staring from the house next door, and he quickly looks away. He leaves to get his bicycle and again is caught staring when she passes by. Afterward, Carson comes around again, engaging him more about ladies, but he doesn't seem to be interested. They both return home when a neighborhood friend calls in Doug and introduces him to their new neighbors, the Harpers. Apparently, the Harpers happen to be the rich couple he spotted earlier. Mr. Elliot Harper, who already met with Doug's parents, takes a liking to Doug and offers him a job opportunity on his ship as a maintenance manager. They both agree on a meeting the next day. In the next scene, Douglas goes there to check the boat out by the next day, and again meets Mrs. Harper coming in from the water in a provocative bikini. He watches her go in as she is with nothing on in a wooden see-through cubicle. Doug's thoughts are interrupted by Mr. Harper's entrance. He gives Doug a summary of the day's work, and they begin. That night, thoughts of Mrs. Harper go through his troubled mind as he struggles to get some sleep. He looks out the window again, but this time he sees his new boss trying to have his way with his unwilling wife. The next day comes, and while on duty, Doug asks Mr. Harper how he acquired all his wealth. He answers that it is all down to risk. He tells him that the trick is to rise to the challenge in a difficult situation. The next scene reveals Doug working on a task when he hears someone scream. He rushes down to the source of the distress sound, only to find Mrs. Harper asking him to help remove a spider from her dashboard. He helps her take care of it and fixes her jammed dashboard. He tells her that all that needs doing is a push-in, and she teasingly asks if he has any experience with that. That night, there's a downpour as Doug arrives home, and he finds Mrs. Harper waiting for him outside. She introduces herself as Lena and asks if he could help her get inside since she already locked herself out. Doug inquires if there are any open windows first. She replies that she checked already, so they opt to break one. He wraps his shirt around a stone nearby and shatters one window pane. Going through the hole, he opens the door for her from the inside but sustains a cut. She offers him first aid and a beer. She introduces her husband's work to him and hints about her loneliness too. She cleans him up and before he leaves, however, he brushes his lips against hers. He immediately apologizes for the awkwardness, but she tells him to try again. Then, they do it more intensely and end up making out. The next morning meets them both on the bed, with the mutual agreement to keep the last night's event a secret. He returns to duty and meets up with Carson at the harbor. His friend confuses his absence last night for a trip to Fantasyland, and Doug doesn't say much. After a little discussion, they both go swimming. The day goes on normally for him, but not without slight visual distractions from Lena and obvious green lights. Her tactics seem to be provocative bikini display in the daytime and an open display of undergarments at night. Their escapades go on like that for a few days, when one morning, Lena joins him on the boat. She says her husband asked her to tag along, and she uses the excuse of inspection to lure him inside. She tells him that one day, she would love to disappear, never to look back, as they continue small talk about sailing. And then they sail to their next romantic adventure, right there on the ship. In the next scene, we see Doug following Lena to a store, following her lead to the back. Even with Mr. Elliot Parker right outside, they go on to have a quickie there, against Doug's better judgment. In the heat of the makeout, they do not hear Elliot open the door, nor walk across the store toward the restroom. Only when Elliot calls out Lena's name, They become aware of their predicament. They suddenly go quiet. Elliot approaches them gradually. He stops very near to the toilet. She tells Doug to stay still. His knee hits a milk bottle and the racket it causes raises Elliot's ears, but he finally ignores it and instead walks away from the area. Lena rushes to dress up and joins Elliot on his way outside. The next scene unfolds, with Elliot calling for Doug with a stern face. He is frightened already but finds out Elliot has only called to bring his attention to some work errors. He gives him a lecture on the gravity of small mistakes, and the essence of his harshness towards him, but instead, Doug discreetly tells him to treat people right for them to appreciate him. Later, Doug goes over to Lena's house for a bed picnic. They enjoy their company together for a little while. Doug sees a tattoo on her leg, which leads to a discussion about her past, about first love, and the permanence of youthful decisions. She then hands him 2 untraceable passports, just in case Elliot finds out about them. They continue their love play and Doug takes note of the gardener who could see them. Later that night, Lena calls him from a nearby medical center in Raleigh, saying her husband hit her again and she wants a divorce. He prompts her to inform the police but she refuses, warning that he doesn't know what Elliot can do. The next morning, she lures Doug out of work with a provocative picture, and they have a quickie in a shed that Doug and his friend earlier prepared. Afterward, night comes with more trouble than expected as Doug receives a distress call from Lena. She asks him to trust her no matter what happens, and then, she shows him Elliot's body, telling him that her violence towards him was an act of self-defense. She explains to him that they can tell no one about this because of the brutality of his family in protecting their son's image. Doug tells her to act completely calm for the rest of the day until he figures something out. Later on, Doug returns to the bar, but his mind drifts elsewhere, which becomes noticeable. Carson pins his distraction to some mystery girl, which Doug outrightly denies. He gets home to find that Lena has approached his parents already, but acts like he doesn't know her. Back at her house, they begin to cook up a story that could fit in with the facts. Eventually, Doug decides to conceal the body and proposes that they say that Elliot suddenly disappeared. After that, Doug drags Elliot's body to his large yacht to make it look like Elliot sailed away and had an accident. He is almost caught by the watchman, who confuses him for Mr. Harper, and then goes his merry way. In the morning, Lena is seen being comforted by officials who have discovered the wrecked yacht, with substantial evidence to prove that Mr. Harper was on it. Meanwhile, Doug catches wind of a notorious detective who came to town from Big Jack. The detective speaks to the sheriff, introducing herself as Detective Alvarez, but he gives her a tough time, supposing she is a rookie as this was her first big case. He eventually agrees to let her use his office for the first interrogations, of which Lena is first. Lena gives them a well-rehearsed storyline of the incident. Meanwhile, investigations outside are going on smoothly, until the guard mentions a suspect he might have sighted that night. This was not good news for them. Back at the Harper's home, Alvarez takes up the investigation and finds the shattered window from the other night. She takes note of this. Alvarez calls in Doug for questioning, and he also feeds them a properly rehearsed version of the night. She also tries to get words from his mouth concerning his impression of Mr. Harper, but the lawyer present catches wind of this and ends it before it goes too far. Up next, at work, Doug finds out that Lena had included some imaginary stalker in her story, and meets up with her for an explanation. He then seeks to erase any evidence that could attribute him as a stalker, including mobile phones. Afterward, Doug gets home to find out that Alvarez is onto him based on matching blood samples from the shattered glass. Alvarez calls Doug aside in her vehicle and tries to tell him that he could have just been manipulated. She seeks to pry words out of him, but he finds it discomforting. He asks to be excused. At Carson's house, Doug explains the whole truth to Carson. Carson then tells him to explain himself to Big Jack. He finds Big Jack, and the sheriff gives him the long tale about him calling the shots in the area. He urges Doug to not let some outsider run the town over their heads. He also speaks to Doug about being the best companion he can get, but he is interrupted by a phone call from Doug's parents. Doug hints Big Jack about the gardener, and when he leaves, Big Jack scoops up his cup neatly as a DNA sample. After the tests, they find out that Doug's samples indeed match the samples from the break-in. At Doug's home, Big Jack comes to Doug's parents to give them a head start on the investigation. He goes upstairs to meet Doug, but Doug has escaped. Doug rides off with Alvarez hot on his heels. He runs to the shed that he set up, and Lena sees him there. But she's not there for assistance. She already took the burner cell phones which Doug stashed away, and instead frames Doug with an attempt to force himself on her. Doug is arrested, and while he tries to explain himself to Big Jack, the good sheriff gives him a chance to escape. He opens the police vehicle, revealing Doug's bicycle. He sees what the sheriff is doing, and makes a run for his life. Doug runs to a cabin where he kept the passports and finds the burner cell phones. Alvarez walks in on him and he begs her to look at the evidence. She does and spots his innocence. She notifies the rest of the team, as she brings Lena in. They both walk away when Doug notices the second pair of Lena's tattoos on Alvarez's heel. The entire conspiracy then dawns on him. Alvarez was in on the scheme all along. As they drive away, Doug makes eye contact with Lena, and she confirms his suspicions with a knowing look. She drops the cell phone on the balcony, and off they both go, leaving a handcuffed Douglas speechless. All her puns begin to replay in his head, and her words begin to take the frame in his mind. The cell phone she leaves behind provides proof to reduce the charges on Douglas, though. In the closing voiceover, Doug narrates how he eventually went to prison, but on reduced charges for a short period. Lena and Alvarez are still on the run. He contemplates if he would do it all over again.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.